Arrived in Japan following a girl, as so many of us do. I took a year off and I just kind of did whatever I wanted to do. Awful mistake. Deep depression was the result. That was the start. Then it just went nuts. I ended up getting involved with the Yakuza. I didn't go bankrupt. I just basically closed my doors one day and one rainy weekend rode my bicycle all around Shizuoka City to every eikaiwa I could find. It was the most humbling thing that ever happened to me.
Hey there, and thank you for tuning in. We're excited to bring you another great conversation today. If you like the show and want to support us, please hit the subscribe button so we can keep bringing you great content week after week. And if you're feeling extra generous, give this video a like and share your thoughts and comments down below. Thank you so much. And now, let's get into it.
Welcome to Unpacking Japan. I'm Toby, and today we welcome Softy Papa, also known by his real name, Kurt Bell. You're an original J-vlogger, now content creator here, retired in Japan, recently retired in Japan.
That's right.
A country that you've lived in for many years, which you've left and now returned to. So it's a long journey we can dive into, and maybe let's start at the beginning and what brought you here in the first place.
Thank you, Toby. I really appreciate it. It's great to be here. I'm a fan of the podcast. Been watching for quite a while, and then to receive a chance to come down to Osaka and meet you guys in person and see the studios and talk to you about my stories is really something else. Thank you. Yeah, can you believe it's been 6 months, almost to the day today?
Okay.
I think it was the 23rd, so about a week out. 6 months since I came back to Japan and started this retiring in Japan journey, as I'm calling it. So
Must be quite a change.
you know, it's been probably the most colossal shift in my life, more significant than finishing university by far, more significant than getting married, even more significant than becoming a father. Finishing one's life's work, so to speak, at least the practical life's work that, you know, allows one to provide for a home and raise a child and do all those things that fill life with meaning, is far more significant than I had ever anticipated, even though I thought that was going to be the case. And it's been a struggle. So I'm 6 months in and still trying to find my footing.
What makes it so significant?
It's the wholesale loss of meaning that comes from having a purpose that is imposed upon us by our need to make a living. So whether we like our job or not, the necessity of clocking in on Monday and then going through the whole work week and then clocking out on Friday and enjoying 48 hours of rest in between before we do it all again imposes something into our lives that is hard to replicate when we're given the freedom to find our own way, especially when we haven't practiced that, and especially after 60 years of life, because I'm 61 right now. After 60 years of life of doing anything but that, because the childhood was going to school and preparing to join the workforce.
That's true.
Then the workforce was all about being a part of the workforce, right? And even though I'll be the first to confess it, I, for the most part, hated my career. My career gave me a sense of meaning. And now I've been 6 months in without that imposed meaning. And it's a little bit like being on a little boat that is kind of towed behind the big ship, and suddenly the rope comes loose and now you're drifting in the sea, and there goes the ferry boat with all your coworkers off into the distance, into the night, and you're left alone. Now you can go anywhere you want, and maybe you got some provisions and a little sail, but now what?
I like that image. So we'll talk about how the sailing is going.
Okay.
You talked about a long career, a career that at some point landed you here in Japan. What was it that kind of made this change from the United States to Japan originally?
Well, that's an interesting question. It wasn't the career. I've never been one to follow my career, except when I finally got to the point in life that I knew that I needed it. And that was when I had lost my business, and I had lost $1 million.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I lost everything at one point in my life, and then I knew that in order to get back on my feet, I had to go back to the career that had sustained me before, and that meant going back to America. So I didn't arrive in Japan following a career. I arrived in Japan following a girl. And as so many of us do. So that began in the late 80s when I met my now wife. And together, and I'll just refer to her as Yumiko, that's her name. Together, Yumiko and I have been now together 38 years, and we've transitioned between Japan and the United States. I mean, wholesale uprooting everything and moving to the other country, and then wholesale uprooting and moving everything back to the other country 5 times in the course of 38 years.
5 times.
Yeah. So we're very practiced at starting over. And we have a rule between the two of us that every time we switch countries, we don't take anything with us. We're allowed 2 suitcases each. And that's it. And we start over everything from scratch.
Why this rule?
To basically hit the big reset button. And we don't want the baggage of the past, literally the baggage of the past, to clutter our lives. We have one exception to that. We call it photographs and memories. The photographs always come. We're very analog in our photos. We have a big suitcase full of photographs. That's the one suitcase that's exempt from the 2 rule. And then we have memories. Anything that's like, especially since we became parents, anything that we just couldn't part with. It reminds us of some memory. Mm-hmm. We give an exception to those. We ship those over separately, but no furniture, no convenience items. It's all got to go and start over from scratch. And we just did it again. We literally started over from scratch 6 months ago when we bought our house here in Japan and came with nothing.
You said you followed Yumiko to Japan in the late 80s. What was your experience moving here at that time?
I was thinking about that as I was coming into your studio today. Because, in fact, Yumiko and I lived in Sakai, which is...
Oh, very close to Osaka.
Yeah, yes. Not far away. And, in fact, I worked in Osaka at the time. And the area at that time was very different. There, of course, and you've heard this from other older content creators, there was no internet. So everything was letters or late night international phone calls to your family back home. Connections were all done by meeting at bars or at work or whatever. And Japan was still, even Osaka at that time, was still enamored of the foreigner. So there were still, at least those of us that stood out as foreigners were enough that people would stare, people would go out of their way to talk. I remember being escorted from Kyoto to Osaka by an old man who thought I was confused on the train and literally bought a ticket for the 2 of us and brought me across and then walked me by the hand all the way to the place I was going. Yeah. That happened here in Osaka. There was few enough of us around that kind of exceptional treatment was going on. So I would say that it was different insofar as it was to use that word again, it was an analog culture where the foreigner was still alien enough to stand out, which was a double-edged sword. Mm-hmm. When you stand out that much, it can be grating, but it can also be very endearing when you're treated nicely and when you learn how to treat them, of course, but reciprocally so.
How many years did you live in Japan at that time before you uprooted your life again?
Let's see. So I'll do a quick chronology from 89 to 92 in Japan, here in Osaka. And then from 92 to 2000 to 2003 back in United States in a town called Santa Barbara on the coast there. And then from 2000 from then until 2000, and then we came back to Japan in 2003 to raise our daughter here. Our daughter was born in 2000 in Santa Barbara. When she was 3 years old, we came back to Japan and we stayed in Shizuoka City, where my wife is from 2003 until we went back to America in 2014. And then we were back in America until 2024, and and then the whole family came back last year.
Wow, that's a lot of changes, and I can imagine it gets increasingly difficult when you have a child as well.
Yeah, it's difficult. Well, we made the transition twice with the child. The first time was in 2003, and we were loaded. We were millionaires, so we just threw money at every problem. Rent, just throw a bunch behind. You just give them a year's lease up front. Buy a car, just go down and buy one from scratch. Any problem, we just threw money at it. That's part of the reason I don't have money. I lost all my money. Going over when Emily that's our daughter, Emily, when she was 13 going on 14, was more of a challenge because we were dealing with a young person who's cognizant of the world, right? When Emily was 3, she didn't know what was going on, right? She just, and she said herself, she's been interviewed on podcasts too. She said, I just went where my parents went. But when she was a teenager going over, It was difficult for her, more difficult than she ever let on at the time. I only learned how difficult it was for her because she was on a podcast and she explained how difficult it was to the interviewer. And I talked to her later. I said, I had no idea it was so hard for you, Emily. She got through it. And it was hard for my wife and I because to try to facilitate that transition, which was a challenge.
What do you have to think about as a parent when you're kind of planning for this and moving with a child who has to change schools, change countries, leave friends behind, maybe adapt to a new school system, all of these things?
So the options are depend on where you're going. We were returning. I was fortunate to land a job in Los Angeles area, which is quite cosmopolitan, and there are lots of different communities in Los Angeles. So when we were moving back to Los Angeles and I went over first, and then I stayed here for 14 months alone before my wife and daughter joined me. So I had 14 months to prepare the way, find us a place to live, get everything settled. So what I did to accommodate my daughter's needs was I was working in a city called Riverside, but I researched all the different cities around Southern California within commuting distance of where I worked to find one that could be the best landing spot for our daughter. And we settled on a community called Irvine, which has huge Asian population, lots of Japanese people there, and it has a school system because it has such a large influx of Asians in particular, a school system with an exceptional English as a second language program and a community of Japanese that she could then integrate into. That softened the landing for her. But if you're moving to a place that doesn't have that kind of option, then it's just going to be a harder,
Would you do anything differently, knowing how your daughter's experience now, how she shared it, that she had faced those challenges and so on? As a parent, would you kind of go through the whole process differently and maybe pay attention to different things than just choosing a community where there are maybe people she can relate with?
Well, the thing that surprised me that I learned after the fact was how scared she was to come to America. And I remember I was in America for 14 months before she came over. So her fear of America didn't really begin to build until after I was gone. So I didn't have a chance to see that firsthand. And then she hit it after she got there. So now knowing what I know now and knowing that she was afraid to leave Japan, I would address that somehow. I would try to find a way to improve my communication with her, to maybe have a way to somehow ameliorate that fear that I didn't know was there. I thought she was going to face it down the same way that my wife and I face it down, like an adventure, but she was genuinely afraid.
It's a difficult thing to deal with when your child is afraid and
when
you're not there.
And you don't know it. Yeah. And you don't know that they're afraid.
For you, moving back and forth between the two countries over multiple decades has meant kind of reinventing yourself as well. You said you didn't come here for career and you had your own company didn't succeed. And I believe you also worked as an English teacher for a while.
That's right.
How do you reinvent yourself? How do you adapt yourself to a new environment, to a new country, and back and forth all the time?
I would say it's a little bit like a plant that is growing that gets maybe a branch chopped off. Like I'm growing tomatoes in my garden right now, and the wind blew them over the other couple of weeks back, and I noticed that the plant seemed to have reoriented itself and found its new way up. And then I accidentally clipped off one branch that was supporting something, and another branch came up and grabbed on. Just like that. At this point in my life, at 61, I reason my way more than ever through the challenges of life. When I was a younger person, I didn't reason my way through. I just found my way through trial and error. So it was a matter simply of a resolve that I wasn't going to fall down and fail. I wasn't going to, that I could make it somehow. That's all it was just a determination to not fall down and not get up again. Like Daruma, where is he?
The Daruma is kind of hidden on the shelf behind you, or on
right
your
there.
mug. Yeah.
So the motto of Daruma is life knocks you down 7 times, get up 8, right? So that's been I guess I follow Daruma's example all along.
One thing you've done along your journey is document it online under your alias, Softy Papa. That's a YouTube channel also that you started 18 years ago.
Yeah.
I checked today again. The first video was uploaded back then.
Yeah.
How did that get started, and what was the idea behind just documenting things here in Japan?
So it didn't start off as I didn't intend to be a content creator. I don't think really content creators by and large existed when I did my first upload. I simply had an exciting family event, like so many people that started early in YouTube. I had this thing that happened. I happened to record it. Hey, I can share it with people over here on this thing called YouTube. And that's what I did. And then the people that I intended it to be viewed by and large ignored it. And then suddenly there were all kinds of people watching and leaving comments who were strangers to me. And they were very interested. And so then that led to yet another one, and then another one after that. And so that started to develop a community, a following, as they say, and an identity and a brand. And that led to a series of brands, Walking in Japan, which is me literally walking about Japan, documenting it. A band in Japan, which was something I started because I was exploring in the mountains, and I would come across what people now commonly call akiya, old abandoned, I didn't even know what that word was back then, and old abandoned houses and farms and shrines and graveyards, etc. And I would document those under that brand. Real Japan Monsters, which is my fascination with Japanese wildlife, particularly creatures with more than 2 legs. And there was also another one, Japan Train Videos. And then a final one, which turned out to be the most important one for me, the brand, which is called Lyle's Brother. And Lyle is my brother, and I am Lyle's brother, which was very strange when I went back to America, and people that knew my brother would say, "Oh, you're Lyle's brother." I said, "Yes, I'm Lyle's brother." Lyle's Brother became a brand. I hope I'm answering your question and not segueing off too far. It became a brand of its own when what would happen was I would be out walking through the streets of Japan, and I'm a lazy editor, so I would just leave the camera running, and I would have the iPhone 4 up, and it would be doing its thing. And I would then cut it out and upload the video, and people would send me comments and say, "Kurt, don't turn the camera off when you're talking, and especially when you're not talking about Japan anymore, when you've gone off." Because I would say, "Well, I'm not talking about Japan anymore. I'm talking about me. They're talking about my thoughts, what's going on in my life." They said, "That's the stuff we want to hear. We want to hear the stuff talking about how you feel about your life living in Japan, being a dad, all these things with the troubles, the good things, the bad." I realized that's a different brand. That's not a Japan brand. That's a me brand. That's the human brand. So I labeled that Lyle's Brother. And I would say now, after all these years coming back to Japan, that's the brand that I'm leaning on most and leaning into most, even though I don't call it out by name anymore.
So basically what people nowadays refer to as vlogging, but before that was a term that was popular.
Right.
What was the community like back then when YouTube was not such a huge social media powerhouse, and it feels like it was maybe more of a localized, organic community platform?
It was exactly, you described it. It was a localized, organic community platform. It's those of us that were called the J-vloggers, which I remember that term just kind of emerging, organically again, out the J-vlog community. And we used to have cups and logos and all kinds of stuff, stickers, all the kind of branding. It was truly a branded community. They were people who had come to Japan during the analog years, knew that the need, if you were going to be social in Japan, that means you had to brush against people, you had to go places and meet people, and you had to share and collaborate. So since we took that analog way of living, and then as the internet was just arriving, we tried to impose that analog way of life onto YouTube. Mm-hmm. Probably the most powerful feature that no longer exists on YouTube that helped us to do that was the response video. Back in the old days, you could leave not just a comment on a video, but like if Victor, Give Me a Freak Man, I don't know if you had him on your channel yet. You ought to. He's the godfather.
Okay. He's
the godfather of J-Vlog. He's an incredible human. He just lives up in Nagoya. He goes under 2 monikers, Give Me a Flake Man and Give Me a Break Man. If Victor uploaded a video and I thought that was really interesting, I would create my own video. I would upload it and then I would tag it as a response video, and it would literally hang off the bottom of Victor's video. And everybody that did a response video would hang all the videos. So you could have this thing where one of us made a video and the other content creators made response videos, and the viewers could see that, and then they would click on the response video, they would subscribe to that person. Do you see how it organically connects?
It's interesting how that feature now doesn't exist anymore. And you do see response videos here and then, but it's going to be titled video in response to what blah, blah, blah content creator.
Right. You can't find it necessarily unless the algorithm finds it for you, right? But this response video capability gave the community this kind of a networking that all you needed to do was find one of us, and you found all of us by virtue of this fact.
How did documenting and recording all of this, sharing it online, change your life and your experience in Japan at the time?
It had positive and negatives, as all things significant do. For me, it gave me something to do. When I suddenly, I've got to recreate for you a little bit what it was like. Okay, we all know what it's like. There's the big YouTubers now, right? They're measured in hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of subscribers. In the early days, you were a big YouTuber if you had 10,000 subscribers. I mean, it was a big event when you got to the 1,000 mark. There wasn't even monetization at that time, right? It was just kind of a numbers game. So when my channel hit 1,000 subscribers and I had all these people watching these videos, I wasn't even making any money. Suddenly I was flushed with this feeling of fulfillment, like almost like celebrity. Like, wow, all along, because we all kind of grazed through adolescence thinking we're special, right? Something about us, it's just a matter of time before the world's going to figure that out, right? Hey, they figured it out. And I went through that, and I know that others went through that. I'm sure Kevin, I don't know if you've had Busan Kevin on the channel.
Not yet.
I'm sure Kevin and I were right there together. And so that was a positive. The negative was what celebrity or a sense of celebrity does to everybody, right? It kind of goes to your head, right? And I would be the first to admit that sense of celebrity and that wanting more then became a distraction to my normal life. And I would say that I became a measurably and demonstrably less capable father and husband during those years than I would like to have been if I could go back.
Wouldn't you say, though, that nowadays people starting YouTube channels or starting creating content on whichever platform it may be have exactly the same or facing the same challenge of reaching a certain amount of visibility and notoriety in the field will maybe have it go to their head and make big changes to their life, not always positive?
Yes, the same danger exists. I don't know that it's a bad thing unless the person to whom it impacts is incapable or is not good at managing the experience. I got tacit feedback, if not very explicit, but tacit feedback from my family at the time that this is all good for you, Kurt. Just kind of keep us out of it. Right? That's why my daughter and my wife do appear a little bit in my older videos, but not very much because they were like, I realized where the limits were, right?
YouTube wasn't also known as it is today. You mentioned there was no monetization. It was not really seen as a platform where, like nowadays, a lot of people started with the intention of monetizing it and the idea that they can make a living off creating content. But that was not something you were thinking back then. It was.
I remember when, and it was an interesting thing. I remember when the monetization thing showed up, I ignored it for 2 years. It started up, people started doing, all you had to do back then was apply. There were no particular criteria. You'd apply and somehow YouTube would look at your channel and make a decision and monetize it or not. And I ignored it for 2 years because I was like, I'm not going to sell out. I'm not going to be a sellout. Literally that's what I was saying. Until one day I got an email from YouTube saying, we monetized your channel for you.
Then you have no more choice.
I had no choice. So they had monetized my channel on my behalf. And so suddenly I'm monetized. And it was interesting because when that happened and the money was good, back then. I mean, it was really good. I mean, it was making a living type of good money
Oh, wow.
then. And we were all small. I mean, I'm still measured in, I'm a small fry. So the money was good. And then it became really engaging. It was hard to ignore at that point, right? And it really kind of sucked us in, all of us.
One of the positive outcome of this, though, was the community, the people you connected with. And you just mentioned a few names of people that were part of this J-Blog scene, also thanks to the system where you could kind of respond to people in video. How has connecting with those people kind of helped you maybe create a network of people living here in Japan that you can relate to, that you can exchange with about your experience?
That's interesting. So I was kind of unfortunate during the early J-Vlog period, or I guess I should say the J-Vlog period, in that I'm a little older than my peers. Victor, who the aforementioned Give Me a Break in, he's just a few years younger than me, but almost everybody is I've got at least a decade on everybody else. So what that means is that during the J-Vlog years, where everyone else was still single or married, they were married, but most of them didn't have kids. They were free to go off and to Tokyo Hanami or go to the meetups or whatever, and they had lots of free time. I had a young child and a failing business on my hand, so I was very focused and distracted, and I didn't attend events. I didn't go to stuff, and I pretty much ignored. I was kind of a ghost in the machine. But to answer your question then, what it has resulted in is that all these years later, we're like a group of fraternity brothers and sisters, mostly brothers, who remember going to university together, which was being in J-Vlog, which is a long gone memory, right? But we can still talk to each other in the back end. And we can relate, and we have this camaraderie that runs really, really deep, whether or not we actually, like, I've never met Busan Kevin O'Shea. I've never met him, but I feel this connection with him, and we talk on the back end like we grew up together. So that's what it yielded. It yielded this long-term community that still exists today, that's invisible. You don't see it anywhere except through the back end DMs that we share with one another.
Do you feel that in the social media sphere today, this is still the case? Or are successful content creators now so big that it's much more difficult for them to kind of still get a sense of community in that content creation scene? We see a lot of creators collaborating with each other, but it seems more difficult than ever to kind of really have this sense of community where maybe 40 years from now you look back and you still share those experiences. So it's the same and different, and I want to answer the question at two levels, right? So it's the same because humans haven't changed. We still want connection and we want to bond and find one another. It's different in that the landscape has changed. Back in the 90s, in the early 2000s, I remember, even here in Osaka, you see a foreigner across the street. I'd walk across the street and introduce myself. It was so rare to see somebody like that. So what I'm trying to say is, let me try to put it a different way. Being on YouTube or being in social media in the early days of YouTube was like riding a small 2-car train in the countryside of Japan. If you saw another foreigner on the train, you'd probably strike up a conversation with him because there just wasn't anybody else around, right? And you had that in common. Versus now, it's a little bit like the YouTube scene. It's a little bit like trying to squeeze onto the train at Umeda at 8:30 in the morning. You're surrounded, you're packed in. There's a foreigner. Every third person is a foreigner. You're not likely going to meet somebody. So they're there, but the dynamic, the catalyst to meet one each other by virtue of being few of us and the communication being analog initially and training us to reach out and cross the street and say, hey, where are you from? That's changed. So it's harder to meet one another, but the humans still want to meet one another. They do. You said that you were doing this while having a failing business on your hands.
Yeah.
It's a business you had here in Japan.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what business you tried here and what happened to it?
Sure, I'm happy to. That's an open book. And by the way, I am for the record. I don't know how to describe it. awful businessman. I failed not just once, but 5 times at business, every time leading to ruin. So I'm, and I'm happy to talk about it. If anything, is a cautionary tale for anybody else. But anyway, I came to Japan, and this may be interesting. I came to Japan with $1 million in 2003, and literally $1 million in the bank. And by 2008, it was all gone. And I was in debt. And I had started off a business as an antique dealer. I was going to sell. I was going to sell all the great stuff I saw at the initially all the great stuff I saw at the flea markets to people overseas on this newfangled internet thing, right? And then that branched into selling goods that were hard to acquire in Japan. And I quickly niched into religious items, Shinto, omamori, ofura, the things you can buy at the shrine, because there's a lot of people out there that want to get that stuff overseas, but they can't get it unless they get on a plane back then and come to Japan. Buddhist items, I had connections with makers, manufacturers all over Japan, especially down in Kyoto. And I had this business that I ran from 2003 to 2008. And it went pretty good. It was chugging away. I had an office. I had an employee. My wife was working there as well. We had relationships with all these vendors. And then along came the 2008 financial crisis, when basically the world shut down. And the stuff that I was selling was nothing that anybody really needed. It was all, bonus purchases. My business just dried up. And my mistake was not seeing the writing on the wall. And instead of shutting everything down and getting out while I could, I just continued throwing money at the business until it was all gone. And I was left laying in my bed one night, staring up at the wall with a stay-at-home wife and a young daughter going to private school, and about 2 months worth of rent in the bank, and no job, and a failed business. And that was the end.
What happens in Japan when your business goes bankrupt?
Well, I don't know what happens to. Well, for me, it was just a matter of shutting everything down, and I didn't do anything proper. I didn't file anything or anything like that. I didn't claim anything. I didn't go bankrupt. I just basically closed my doors one day and gave everything away and went home. So what I did was I borrowed my wife's mother's bicycle, and I got the printer and I printed a resume. And one rainy weekend a couple of weekdays and over the weekend, I rode my bicycle all around Shizuoka City to every eikaiwa I could find with my resume. And I went in the door and I said, "Hi, I'm a native English speaker. Can I get a job with you?" Until I found someone that hired me.
That must have been stressful.
It was the most humbling, I don't know if humiliating is the right word, humbling thing that ever happened to me. Doing that, and the most frightening episode in my life, realizing that my family and I were nearly broke, and having us nearly on the streets. My wife, if you ask her now, she would tell you it's the best thing that ever happened to me, and she says she likes me a whole lot more ever since then.
Why?
Because I became. I fell off the horse that I was on. The money the $1 million that I had I didn't earn it. I was a .comer. I got lucky and got a job with one of those .com companies that went from, I was the 20th employee. And when I left, there were 2,000 employees, and our stock went from $1 a share to several $100s a share. And that's how I made my money. And it went to my head. I thought I made money. I didn't make that money. And it changed me. It made me a different person. It made me a person my wife didn't like. And losing it all in the way that I lost it brought me back to earth.
I want to talk about the antiques a little bit.
Yeah.
Because it's a very niche business, a very niche idea you had there to kind of look for those items on the flea market. Why did you think about starting this kind of...
Because I would go to when I first got to Japan, I had a lot of money in the bank. I didn't have to work. And I took a year off and I just kind of did whatever I wanted to do. Awful mistake. Deep, deep depression was the result. Really bad. Freedom, for those of you, be careful with freedom. It's a dangerous thing. What I did do is I occupied my time going to flea markets, and I like antiques, like I'm looking around, like little things like that. I might even know who made that. So anyway, and I would buy these things and put them around the house. And I realized, hey, maybe other people might like to put this. So I listed it on eBay, and sure enough, sold like that. And
Interesting.
Yeah, so I put another one in, sold like that. So that was the start, just this catalyst thing. And then it just went nuts. I ended up getting involved with the Yakuza, and
that's a story I want to hear.
yeah, and I became a part of a Yakuza group, kind of, and I'm happy to talk about it, and which was a whole other experience all on its own. And I still have all my fingers. So.
You do have all your fingers, I can confirm. But I'm curious, how did you get involved with them? What happened?
So doing the flea market, I don't know if this is true all over Japan, but at least in Shizuoka, where I live, the flea market circle, the Japanese talk about the circles, right? These communities that they have. There's a flea market circle. There's a group of people that it's the same people. If you go to the antiques, the flea market every month, you're going to see it's the same people every month, right? And they're usually kind of like, sorry guys, if you see this, kind of ratty looking shabby guys, because they're dealing with the kind of this world of recycling items, right? They're great guys, but they're lower. I was one too. Anyway, one of them befriended me. And he, after about 6 months of this, he said, hey, we get together, all of us, once a month, and we do our insider stuff. You want to come join us one night? I said, sure. So he gave me the address, and I showed up, and I walked into the place, and it was like walking into, a deli, like a Chicago deli where the mobsters are.
I'm picturing the scene right now.
Yeah, it was. I'm not going to give any details because it still exists. They're still doing it, and they look at me, and then my friend came running over. He's like, "No, he's with me," because like this foreigner. And it turns out that he's kind of a big shot amongst all of them. So they let me in because of him. And that started my thing. I would go every month to this thing with them, and it was a thing where they would come together to exchange goods, right? Because this guy's into art, this guy's into ceramics, this guy's into old religious statues, right? And they would get all their stuff, and they would bring it all together. It's a clearinghouse, and they would clear it all, and the art guy get his stuff, and they would bring it up, and hey, what's this worth? Oh, that's worth 5,000 yen. Talk to the art guy, and I became part of that. And that was my life for several years. And I would go be a part. I'd see the guys at the thing, and I wasn't a Yakuza, but I fraternized with them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did you specialize in anything in particular?
Religious items.
Religious items.
Yeah. I specialized in religious items, so anything to do with anything that kind of had a real wabi-sabi, feel like a statue that was like a Jizo statue that's missing an arm.
How do you value all these items? Because if you are, let's say you have a religious item from a local shrine and you're a local resident, you might appreciate that shrine very much. You might be willing to pay a certain amount of money to have this in your home if the shrine doesn't need it anymore. If you're selling this to someone overseas who doesn't know the shrine, doesn't know the historical context, how do you decide to sell the statue for, let's say, $100 or $1,000? I
can answer that very, very clearly. So first of all, the religious items that I was selling from shrines were all brand new. And I made it very clear. I made it a relationship with the priest at the shrine to let them know what I was doing. I would go to them and I would literally say, hey, I would like to buy 5 of those ofuda and 10 of those omamori. And they were like, why? And they were like, why are you getting so many? And I said, what I want to do before I made the purchase, I said, I have no people overseas that want to buy these. I want to resell them to them. Can I buy them from you and do that? And if they were okay with that, then I had a formula. Basically, I paid them full price for everything. I never asked for a discount. And then I would mark the item up just enough to make it worth my while. It was kind of like a bread and butter item so that I wasn't ripping people off, but it was a reasonable amount. It made it worth my time to do that. And then what people would do, omamori are those little luck charms. People that would buy an omamori from me would also browse at my store and they would see a statue that they wanted. And then they'd buy that too, right? So I was using the religious items as a vehicle to service the needs of my customers, while also introducing them to other items. And I made it very clear to the shrines that I was working with of what I was doing, and they knew and they gave it their blessing, so to speak.
Might be a little bit more difficult with a unique piece, right? Like a very historical item.
Any of those, I used those. Yakuza isn't really the right term to describe these people. They're like a different type, but they're associated with the Yakuza world. I used them as the clearinghouse. After a while, I got all of my items from them. Remember, we would come together once a month at this clearinghouse place, and I would have my place to sit. And they all knew what I liked. And they would go through this stuff, and it was an auction, and they would decide how much they're going to pay for every item. And the auctioneer knew what I liked. And if a particular item came up, like a little old Jizo statue came up, right? Well, they would turn to me. They would say, Kurt, Kato is what they call me. What do you want to buy this? And the auctioneer would know what it's worth, and you'd ask that much. So what I was doing was, because I felt uncomfortable selling old Buddhist statues, right? Like, where did they come from, right? But I used them. If it got through the clearinghouse to me, then I thought it was okay.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And then I priced, and those items I priced at a competitive, right? Because they were the ones that I actually made money on versus the new religious items.
I can hear the passion and the interest into antiques and looking for them and understanding the story and giving an opportunity to people overseas to buy them.
So much fun.
How did you handle the change to then becoming an English teacher after you closed your company?
Well, by the time that I did that, I was so devastated by what had happened, and I associated antiques with that I had no interest in antiquing. I had no interest in starting a business. I realized I had failed yet again at business and brought my family to near ruin. So I disassociated with it. I didn't want to be a businessman. I didn't want to be an antique dealer. Done.
The end.
Which is funny that I'm doing it again.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So so I approached being an English teacher with this wholesale gratitude. Okay. I was like, the company that gave me the chance, I would have kissed their feet, and I threw myself headlong into it. And I was a really good English teacher, even though I don't like teaching English, because I was so grateful to them, and I remain that way. And just this morning on the friggin' train coming down to see you, I passed the school. I saw the school. I went by, and I gave him a tip of the hat. I was like,
it's interesting how overnight one person's priorities, perspectives can change.
Getting emotional.
Yeah. But not an easy change, one you're grateful for, and that kind of helped you move forward. And eventually you left Japan again. You uprooted yourself back to the States. And I want to talk a little bit now about coming back. 6 months ago, you decide, you finish your career, you leave that behind in the United States. What makes you decide to retire here in Japan?
Well, I will add that. I just want to let you know that your listeners might find this interesting. The first thing I did after I got back to Japan was I went to that school.
Oh.
And I went, and this is going to sound stupid. People are going to think that I'm an ignorant foreigner and I don't know what I'm doing. But I was emulating what I saw on TV, and I went to the principal's office because he's the director now, and he's the guy that hired me. And I went to his office, and I stood up, and I did what I'd seen Japanese people do, and I bowed down as deeply as I could, and I thanked him for hiring me. And I said, "Thank you for." I didn't say this, but I was like, "Thank you for saving me," because I wanted him to know that even though I left Japan and I quit working for his school, I will be eternally grateful to him in his school for giving me the chance to work there again. So that's the first thing I did after I came back.
I think it's a good thing to do. It's very valuable, and I'm sure he really appreciated you coming by and showing your gratitude.
Yeah. So you asked why I came back to Japan. So let me see. Why did I come back to Japan? I talked about this with myself on the train coming down. I guess it was time. My wife and I were living, we went back to America, and we succeeded in America. We climbed back up on our feet, both of us. and we did very well in America. We were there for 10, she was there for 10 years. I was there for 11 years. Yet it almost killed us. You know, the hot, incredibly high stress, difficult jobs that we both had in Southern California, closing in on our 60s. And I mean, literally emergency room visits to me, for me, thinking I was, you know, having a heart attack. And we had to end that life. That was going to kill us if we kept it up. So we escaped back to, so I guess we escaped back to Japan.
How would you describe the process for you coming back to Japan? Not this time to kind of uproot your life and start over, but rather, okay, this big chapter of working is finished and I'm going to retire. I'm going to take it slower. We're going to comfortable settle here.
So please ask the question again. Sorry.
How did you approach it differently this time that you were moving back to Japan, not for a drastic change in your career or changing something, kind of shaking things up, but rather slowing things down and just kind of settling?
Okay. So we approached that by having a plan. And we detailed, it was a 2-year plan. So we decided that we would quit our jobs and return to Japan in 2000. We decided that in 2022.
Okay.
So then I'm a project manager. So I project managed the thing. So I came up with a schedule, a list of scope, a budget, the whole thing. I ran the thing like a project. The project ended when whatever home we would buy and the remodel was complete. The project was done, finished. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's how I handled it. I handled it like a project, and it was a great. One of the best projects I've ever run, and it was It was very successful. My problem was that I didn't have another project ready after that one, and suddenly I'm left with the project being done, and no new project at hand. And that's my current project, is making a new project.
Retiring in Japan, I think, especially in the United States, is currently being discussed a lot. We had a guest on the podcast as well that is running a business, helping people to move here, work remotely or settle here or retire. And you had a plan for this. Yeah. So it's not something that can be done so easily, not something that, okay, you just book a ticket and you fly over. What were the key pillars of your plan for this to become successful?
Well, is it okay if I plug my book?
Yeah, sure.
So when I realized I had a plan, and I realized that Yumiko and I were executing the plan accordingly, I thought, I better take notes. And because these notes could be helpful to others. I knew that people would come asking. So I wrote a book, and it's called Retiring in Japan. That's the name of my brand as well, my new brand. And it's available. And it's not a how-to book. It's not a step-by-step. It is an anecdotal accounting of what my wife Yumiko and I experienced finishing our careers in America, making our way to Japan, finding an akiya, refurbishing that akiya, bringing our dogs over with us, and managing the fact that we were doing this as newly minted empty nesters. So that's what my book is. So in terms of the plan is all codified and documented in my book. And I'm not trying to necessarily sell the book, but I'm happy to answer any questions. But all the details are in there. So as to the fact that there's a lot of people, oh my gosh. When I was a YouTuber before, my demographic was a very narrow margin. It was 18 to roughly 26-year-old young men. This is I call it the Softy Papa 1.0 years before I went back to America. That was the demographic. 18 to 26-year-old young men who wanted to come to Japan and have an adventure. That's not my demographic anymore. My demographic now is 50 to 65-year-old couples who want to, for lack of a better term, escape whatever life they're living in and come live in Japan. And that's the people that are watching my videos now.
Do you think you used the word escape? And I
deliberately.
Think, yes. Do you think that escaping a life is the right approach to move to Japan?
No. And I'm learning that myself, even though I would consider myself an old Japan hand, just by virtue of how long I've lived here. Like I said, I've alluded to it a couple of times. I'm struggling now. Just to nutshell it, whatever with the putting the stress of your career aside. Okay, that when you retire, that goes away. Okay, and that's not saying nothing. That's huge. But whatever problems, whatever challenges are going on in here that you think you're going to escape, you ain't going to escape those things. They're going to come join you as well.
So what should people know about or be prepared for when retiring to Japan?
That's a lot. That's a large question. Let me think if there was a...
So let me rephrase it. What would you have like to know before landing here?
Okay, I would tell myself, if I could go back 2 to 4 years ago, I would say, Kurt, begin working on your issues here and now, because you're going to have a better opportunity and resources to deal with your issues in your own country, where everyone speaks your language, than you are when you're suddenly a foreigner and you're alone, so to speak, alone in a strange land, in a new land.
So you moved here, and one of the first things you had to do after thanking your former director of the school was finding a place to live, I guess. And you mentioned you went for the akiya route, another very popular choice at the moment. How do you go about finding a place to live, acquiring it, and then now you're in the process of renovating it?
Sure. And this is documented in my book in a chapter dedicated to the home finding process. So what I did was very practical. I got out a spreadsheet and I looked for websites where I could begin to search for houses. Initially, it was places like Sumo and then other piecemeal sites. And then along came akiya-mart, a company called Akiya Mart, run by Joey and Take. Are you familiar with Akiya Mart?
I've heard of I've seen their content on social media.
They're not a sponsor, but they did give me a free account because I talk about them a lot. But it's a really good site. It's a site, Akiya- don't forget the hyphen. You can go there and it's pretty much a directory of all of Japan, and it's meant to be kind of like Zillow, but for Akiya. And so I started using Akiya Mart, and I came up with the criteria that I wanted, in terms of price, distance from family, my wife's family, because we knew we wanted to be close to family, and other things as well. Then my wife and I came to Japan in 2023 to reconnoiter communities. We went around. We knew we wanted to live in Shizuoka. We did a 10-day tour of different communities that we had found to knock them off. And that was a really good trip. Do that. I really recommend that, because what we learned really quick was we don't want to be more than an hour away from my wife's family. This just don't want to do it. And then that had narrowed the target down. And then we began just coming up with a short list. And then we found a realtor and started. My wife came over to Japan 6 months before I did. And she and the realtor started going out and looking at places, and they would bring the phone and take me along on a video tour, and we began seeing places. We finally found a place 2 days after I arrived.
That's a good timing.
I arrived, and the realtor called up my wife 2 days later and said, "Listen, there's a property right up the river from you." We had rented an apartment close to my wife's parents' house. He says, "It just came on the market. Why don't you go take a look?" We walked up, took a look, came back, made an offer that night, got accepted that night. So yeah, it was very quick.
That was very quick indeed. What were some of the criteria that were important for you and that you would recommend people pay attention to when looking for an akiya?
Sure. Key amongst the criteria, although there are so many important ones, the one that rose very quickly to the top for us was looking for a house that was built after 1981. That's because we had found, everybody wants the dream of the old Kominka style house, right? We came this close to buying one such house and then we hired an architect to do a structural inspection, a full inspection of the place. And we realized that the place was a death trap. The whole building was leaning 5 degrees. It needed all kinds of work all over the place to get it to be safe and up to anything that resembled modern building code was going to be at least double the purchase price, at least double the purchase price.
Is this something you are able to see by yourself when you visit the place, or you need to hire an architect to kind of check?
Yeah, there's no way I could have figured these things out. I wouldn't even know how to determine how the house is leaning. He has techniques that he does to be able to do that. So yeah, definitely it's going to cost you in US dollars, I hope that's a good measure, $700 to $1,000 to have an inspection done. So you want to have it done on a serious house, and you want to get the right architect to do it. So it's worthwhile. When we realized that, and I did my research about the building codes, and I realized that anything built after 1981, those are going to be on a true foundation. They're not going to be these posts sitting on top of a rock type of a thing. And so then that narrowed our criteria down. We were looking for something after post 1981. Our house is built in 1983, so it met those criteria. We put aside, and it's not a fancy kominka. It's just your boring old Japanese house. But what it does have is location. It is square exactly where we wanted to live. 5 minutes walk along the river from my parents' house, close to train stations, close to all the doctor's offices. We're getting older, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on.
Proximity and stability of the property, I think, seem to be your key criteria. You brought up the dream that many people have of the kominka house. How realistic is this for most? This idea of, I'm going to move to Japan, live in the countryside, get an old kominka, renovate it. It's being discussed so much on social media. But is this something that people should actually strive for unless they are very experienced DIYers
with a budget?
With a budget.
So I'm going to speak for my fellow senior citizens. After all, I am a senior citizen. I would say that after experiencing the renovation work, the DIY work, and surprisingly, the gardening work. Oh my gosh. After experiencing those three things firsthand for 6 months, roughly in our new house, I would say that route is the right route. It's a young person's route to travel if they've got the energy, the time, the inclination, and the money, right? Because it's going to cost a lot of those to keep that going. If you're older like me and you're starting to wind down, your strength just isn't there, your stamina is not there, I don't know if you want to be taking rooms to bare bones, taking it down to the mud and starting from scratch. And let's not get started on the garden. Japan, the fecundity, and that's the right word, the fecundity of this country. I mean, it's like a little shop of horrors in a garden. I mean, the weeds, even the plants you want, you come around the next morning and they're just coming in like that. I mean, it really takes a lot of time and energy to manage a garden and a house.
You mentioned the cost of renovating, which is interesting because I think there is this underlying assumption that getting one of those quote unquote free akiyas and then just renovating it is cheaper than maybe getting a property that is, as you described it, just your regular Japanese house, a bit more recent with more earthquake standards and so on, right. Which it's free, but you need to pay a certain amount of money for it. I don't know how much your property costs, but
I'm happy to talk about that.
They're not free as people describe them, right? You actually buy a property for a certain price and you still need to renovate it a little bit, but that turns out to be maybe cheaper than getting the rural kominka and fully renovating that one.
So I'll give you two case studies, and I'll give you what I remember of the cost that might help you to do this, help to break this down. Before we bought the house we bought, we came this close to buying what's called a machiya, very famous in this part of Japan, in Kyoto, Osaka, the townhouse, right? And the machiya house had all the charm that you'd want in the world for miles, and it had enough room, long, thin property for a yard. The price on that house would have been, I believe it was about 7 million yen to buy.
So
36, maybe
$40,000.
Maybe it was 5 million yen. I remember the dollars. I'll just do Can I just do the dollars?
Sure.
Because I can remember the dollars better than that. It was going to be 35-ish thousand to buy. We had a building in the back that we would need to demolish to make room for a garden. That demolishing was going to cost about another 2 million yen on top of that. Plus we needed to take that 5 degrees and do all the refurbishing, and that was going to be another like 2 or 3 million yen for that. So now we're well over 10.
So the demolition plus adjusting the angle of the house will have been the same amount as you paid just for the property itself. Basically.
Yes, exactly. So we're our budget. Just to let you know what our budget was. Our budget was 10 million yen for the purchase and another 2 million yen for the renovation. So that's roughly at current exchange rate. That's like let's say 70,000 for the buy, 30,000 for the build, right? So that would have been, everything would have been gone. And we still probably wouldn't have had enough for it all. And then we would have an old house that was safe to live in, but very breezy and drafty and old kitchen, old bath, everything, right?
But you still need to or want to maybe change as you want to put in some more comfort in your home.
Right. We would have been all in and had an old house to live in that wouldn't fall on our heads. But so that's it. So all our budget would be gone for that versus what we got, which was, and let me give you a little bit about location, which is really key. The area that we bought our house in Shizuoka is a very desirable neighborhood. It's hard to get a place there because they're very expensive. It's actually kind of place where there's a lot of building going on because everybody wants to live there. Close to 2 train stations, art museum, universities there, just a few stops down from downtown, all the bells and whistles. We got our place there for $9 million was what they wanted for it. We offered them a cash offer. They took it. So we got it for $9 million. And that includes an older house. And it's just basically the value of the property. And then, but they knocked off $1 million in. And I found that almost all of the sellers were willing to do this. They're willing to knock off, and they all seem to be at the same amount. They'll say, "Well, knock off $1 million of yen if you'll take it with all the junk in it."
Oh, because they don't want to pay the cleanup fees.
Right. Exactly. That was the same amount for the other place that we almost bought. They said, "We'll knock $1 million yen off." I don't know if the realtors are telling them knock $1 million yen off or what, but that seems to be the case. So we took that deal. And we knocked off, took it down to $8 million. And then all the renovations, it already had a nice kitchen. And there's no dangerous things in the house. So we don't have to do anything dangerous. It's not going to fall on our head. We needed a new Japanese bath, Senmen-jo, which is the changing laundry area, and a new Japanese toilet. We got all 3 of those remodeled. And that was, for everything, was 2.4 million yen on top of that. So we're all in now. So we're 8 million plus 2.4. We're at just under 1.2. We're right on budget, right? So we're talking like about 100,000 all in.
Okay.
US dollars.
So people interested in akiya should spend some time doing research, what they need, what they really want. Be aware of the pitfalls as well.
And if I can really add, take some time to figure out how to go about it. And maybe I don't even need to say this with the Japanese culture. There's do's and don'ts about things. I mean, in the Southern California environment where I come from, it's a very aggressive environment, bidding wars and stuff like that. Japanese just don't work that way, right? And you're going to get a lot farther along if you just try to make a good relationship with a realtor that you trust and let them guide you along.
Yeah, don't start negotiating too hard on the property. I think it's not so customary here, especially not in real estate in Japan.
Yeah, there's a reasonable start. There's reasonable asks, and then there's stuff that'll make people's heads spin. I mean, that's not the right word to say. You'll put your realtor in a position that they'll be embarrassed to even talk to the buyer, to the seller, and you're like, they're not going to want to deal with you anymore.
Getting a property is one of the big steps for retiring in Japan. But after that, I guess another one is the routine.
Yeah,
you don't have to get up at 6 a.m. on a Monday to go to the office. You can set your own schedule, but suddenly your schedule is also completely free. And one of the things I think you've chosen to do is start documenting again on your new series, Retiring in Japan. You share your stories, you share your insights. And you're back to dealing with some antiques that you find here and there. But it seems that your approach now has been to take this all a bit more slowly, with less pressure, with less ambition perhaps, besides to just enjoy yourself doing it. Am I seeing that correctly?
You are describing the plan perfectly. The execution is a little harder to do. I would like to think that I'm a person who can relax in retirement. Turns out I'm not that guy. Looks like I'm going to be, I have to keep busy. I don't know how to relax. I never have. So I'm finally reconciling that. So I have to fill my life with something, and it has to be very ambitious. I've chosen to fill it with that something. And I don't know if you're going to ask, if you're going to ask me about maybe I hope you'll ask me later what advice I would give myself, the old me, if I could do that. But I'll answer that question if you ask that question, because I think hopefully that'll be helpful. Anyway, I'm trying to find a way to be a happily retired guy in Japan by filling my life with routines that I know and that are familiar with me and that are worthwhile. they are fruitful. I've this Retiring in Japan brand that I've created seems to be a hit, at least by my channel's standards. Right, I've never been a big channel, but I get better views on this than any of my other stuff, and the engagement from the community is good. So it seems to be good. I'm not sure that I really want to be that guy though. I'm not sure if I really want to go down and keep doing this, but I am. And mostly I'm getting encouraged by the other people who just a year ago, I was on their side. I was on the other side of the TV watching people do what I wanted to do, and I was rooting for them. And now I'm one of those guys. So yeah, but I'm struggling with it.
What makes you hesitate to kind of continue or go deeper into it?
That's a very good and pointed question. I don't think I have anything interesting. I think I'm running out of stuff to say, because the interesting stuff was the first 6 months, getting here, getting established, getting a car, finding the house search, which took 2 days, buying the house, renovating the house. Now I'm done with all that. Now I'm just regular old guy getting up in the morning, having a cup of coffee and starting my day. Who cares about that? Other than it's in Japan.
Well, interestingly, referring to what you were saying earlier, when you originally started vlogging 18 years ago, you said that the thing people were interested in were not you talking about Japan, but you kind of just sharing your own stories and your own thoughts and perspectives. So maybe that's the thing that you can focus on now as well.
And I try to do that, and that's what I'm trying to lean into. But I have my doubts. I'm my own worst enemy in that capacity. And I stopped the series, the Retiring in Japan series, stopped it outright. I thought, I'm done. I'm ran out of materials. And then I started, and then my viewers wrote and said, hey, keep it up. So I kept it up and started season 2. So thank you for that. That's exactly what people keep telling me. But I have my doubts.
You've had a very eventful life of back and forth between Japan and the US. You're now kind of slowly settling in here. So I'm going to ask the question you wanted to ask me to ask you. Looking back, what would you tell your younger self about all of this?
Thank you. I brought that up because I thought about it. It was on your list originally. I think you came up with the idea originally, and I thought about it on the train coming down, long and hard. Like if I could literally go back and talk to myself when I first started on YouTube, what would I say? And what I would ask myself is, do you really want to go down this road, Kurt, of being a YouTuber? Because that's the crux of the matter was I became a YouTuber and I became identified as a YouTuber, and I feel like that's been an important part of my identity ever since. And when I would ask myself to seriously consider what other life paradigms could I entertain and do that would be different than being a YouTuber. For example, some men, I'm going to refer to men in my case, some men throw themselves into fatherhood, or they throw themselves into service to their community. And these things are not mutually exclusive. You can mix these things up. I chose to throw myself into being Softy Papa. And at this point, at 61 years old, I've got too much inertia. It's not enough time for me to reinvent myself. But I would ask myself at that earlier age, when I still had the chance, the junction was there. Do you really want to be a YouTuber, or are there other things that I hadn't considered?
When you are at that junction, though, and you ask yourself that question, can you really foresee where that road will take you?
I wouldn't have known. Remember, this is a hypothetical scenario where I'm visited by the ghost of YouTube future. If 61-year-old me showed up and said, Kurt, you're going to enjoy a mild modicum of success on YouTube. The money's going to dry up eventually. You'll have a following. You'll write a couple of books. It'll be relevant to this. But someday you're going to die and it'll all go away. You'll have a good. But you raised your daughter well. Do you really want to go down? Do you really want to do that again? Is that really what you want not legacy? Is that how you want to spend your life, Kurt? I know myself well enough in that period. I would have taken that very seriously, and I would lay odds I would not choose YouTube. I would have gone a different route. So yeah, looking back on myself, if I could go back, I would probably not tell myself to choose a different route, but I would probably give myself advice that would have led me to a different route, and I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you now.
Now you've got the best years of your life ahead here in Japan. You said you're looking for a big, ambitious project. Besides the project, what are the things that you want to do now as a retiree here in Japan?
adventure. As Softy Papa, it's adventure. But I should have, I'm glad I led with that one first because it's the least important one. Okay. I am so happy. And again, you guys got to keep a box of tissues on this. I'm so happy. Okay. Remember how I told you I went, the first thing I did was I went to that school and I bowed to the director and said, thank you for that. I'm so happy that I found my wife again. Miko and I, we were together for 10 years before we had our daughter, and we're not the kind of couple that, like, you know, we don't share any hobbies or anything like that. We just had our life together. We did stuff. We got some movies. We shared bought a thing of popcorn. We're very aligned on our values. We're very comfortable together. During the childhood years and all the struggle years, we kind of went away and we were like we were like sailors on a ship, right? And we're during a storm. Like she was up in the rigging, you know, manning the mizzen mast, and I was down there at the helm doing this. We were doing separate jobs to try to get our ship of our life to the other side. We're on the other side, and now we've both come down, and she's the same person, and I'm the same person. We discovered each other coming into retirement after all these years, and I was really worried that we weren't going to find one another again. So I'm really looking forward to having fun with my wife. The girl that I came to Japan to be with all those years ago is still the same girl that she is now, and I'm largely still the same guy. At least that's what she's saying. So I'm going to have a lot of fun with my wife.
On a little sail ship that is now detached from the big cruiser that is leaving far ahead on calmer seas, hopefully in Shizuoka.
Yeah.
Kurt, thank you so much for the open interview, for sharing so many stories. I'm sure we could go down many other anecdotes that you have. Is there anything that we didn't really get to talk about that maybe you would have liked to share today?
Just wanted to say thank you to you and the team for having me down, and it's been a real pleasure. By the way, this is a really interesting organization. So you know, there's a lot going on here, and I really do appreciate the chance to come to Osaka to meet you guys and to spend some time.
We'll make sure all your links are in the description so people can find your content, learn more about retiring in Japan, maybe read your book if they're interested in the different steps to make it happen, the plan that can help people if they want to do this. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for coming. Thank you everyone for listening and watching this week's episode of Unpacking Japan, and we'll be back again next week. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on future conversations. And we'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comment section down below. And if you enjoyed this episode, here are a couple more that we think you'll enjoy. Thanks again for your support, and we'll see you next time.